Hi, we are from Group Abu Dhabi. Today we are going to present about the topic of audit of payroll. These are the name of our group member Muhammad Shazwan bin Zainuddin and me myself Nonazia binti Ramlan, Nur Najwa Nabila binti Muhammad Nur, Fatin Nurul Aiza binti Zainan, and lastly Nur Akmal Izzati binti Rosli. We may now begin our presentation.
Firstly, I will present about abstract. This assignment will discuss about the audit of payroll. A payroll audit is when an individual from an insurance company perform an audit on the payroll of a company. For a single payroll instance is being used across the organization, it should be possible to run a section report for the higher sickness, high overtime, high sickness, sickness level by location, negative holiday level, and other circumstances. In addition, this topic specifically discuss further about payroll accounting system and control activity, developing the audit time and performing further audit procedures. Firstly, I will take the introduction. To guarantee accuracy, a payroll audit is analysis of the payroll process of a company. Payroll audit examines testing and equality of the company, payroll, salary, and tax withholding. Payroll relates to the equation of labor service and payment to employees. To verify that the process is up to date and legally compliant, we should conduct a payroll audit at least once per year. Similarly, payroll audits are done by internet, which means that someone in the distance is conducting them. Internal audit can help you to catch error and later prevent possible external audit. To ensure that your process is good, we should take a look at our payroll audit checklist. Payroll audit checklist are look at the employee details on your payroll, analyze the numbers, verify time is correctly labeled, reconcile payroll record, and confirm tax withholding and remittance are accurate. The issue in audit payroll are that payroll expense and related deductions are recorded and not understand and the decision resulting from outstanding payroll are recorded. Next is audit objective. Audit objective for payroll consists of obtaining sufficient audit evidence for transaction and balance. General audit objective for payroll are presented in figure below. The first one is transaction objective. There are 5 transaction objectives. First is accrual. Accrual is wage and salary are only paid to non-featured employees for their work performed. Second is completeness. Completeness is all eligible transactions are recorded in the payroll and accounting period. And the third one is accuracy. Accuracy is wage and salary should be calculated based on work performed and term of employment. And fourth is cut-off. Cut-off is payroll transaction should be recorded in the correct period. And the last one is classification. Classification is payroll transaction should be properly classified. And the second one is balance objective. There are 4 balance objectives. First is existence. Existence is payroll expense are valid and related accruals are valid everything. And the second one is right and obligation. Right and obligation is record payroll expense and related accruals and expense obligation of the entity. And the third is completeness. Completeness is all payroll expense and related accruals have been recorded. And the fourth is relation and allocation. Relation and allocation is payroll expense and related accruals are properly valued and allocated in accordance with the accounting standard. And the last one is presentation and disclosure objective. There are 3 objectives for presentation and disclosure. First is accrual and right and obligation. Accrual and right and obligation is disclosed events and transaction has occurred and pertain to the entity. Second is completeness. Completeness is all disclosure that should have been included in the financial statement has been included. And third is clarification and understandability. Financial information is appropriately present and described and disclosed are clearly expressed. And the last one is accuracy and evaluation. Accuracy and evaluation is financial and other information are disclosed, valued and at appropriate amount. The overall objective in the audit of payroll and personal sector is to evaluate whether the income level affected by the cycle are valid state in accordance with the general accepted accounting principles. Conducting a payroll audit regularly can help you to prevent payroll fraud or mismarked time card, detect the cash manual error made when entering number into a system, and the last one is verify resolving tax accuracy. Next is nature of payroll transaction. Payroll transaction include salary, wage, commission, bonus, and other employee benefits such as paid leave and sick leave. In addition, there are other deductions recorded for payroll, such as statutory reduction or voluntary reduction. The related account for payroll are payroll, payment, and pre-payroll deduction account such as Employee Provident Fund or EPF and tax. The Human Resource Department HR is responsible for maintaining employee records, while the Payroll Department is responsible for collecting and making payments to employees. The two functions are separate. This is to prevent fraudulent payments and ensure no payments are made to fictitious employees. They are mainly listed to determine the amount of salary or wage for an employee, such as hourly rate, a daily rate, a monthly rate, or progress rate. Thus, control should be in place to ensure salaries are properly calculated before payments are made. Accounting system and control activities. There are 6 main functions in payroll protection such as first, hiring employees, second in the authorizing territory, third is preparing attendance and time-keeping data, fourth is preparing the payroll, fifth is recording payroll, and the last one is carrying out. It is necessary to take control for each role at the segregation of duties. An independent check for each function is important in the function management because they are based on how the company pays salary. First is hiring employees. Human Resource Department primary responsibility is to hire new employees, and this involves appraising the right candidate for available positions. Human Resource Department is responsible for recording the employee details in personal authorization form and then keeping the data in personal master file. Employee identity include biological data, job qualification, salary scale, and authorized payroll deduction. Data will be kept confidential and can only be accessed or updated by approved Human Resource Department workers. A copy of personal authorization form will be forwarded to Payroll Department for processing payment to employees. Separate function for creating and updating personal record for payroll payment prevent the use of payment made to fictitious employees. With the two functions assumed by the same function, it's likely that there will be a misappropriation of time.
Now, I will continue with the second payroll function, which is authorizing payroll change. Change in job specification and salary scale for an employee can only be made by approved staff in Human Resources Department. It should follow the same procedure as updating data for hiring and dismissing personnel. The control over change in employee data is in place to ensure that the accuracy of the payroll. If revision is made, a revised personnel authorization form will be forwarded to the payroll department for processing payment. This is to ensure that there are no continued payment is made to the employees. Now we continue with preparing attendance and timekeeping data. Attendance and timekeeping data are very valuable for payroll purpose. When employees are salaried monthly or on an hourly basis, attendance and timekeeping data can help to ensure that the correct amount is paid to the employees. Now, many organizations use electronic or computerized systems to manage the attendance and timekeeping data. For example, now many companies use fingerprint time recorder to record their employees' attendance. It should be beneficial to link the system so that the working hour can be conveniently imported to the payroll system. As a result, each employee's attendance and total hours are accurately documented and processed so that the data can be conveniently transmitted to the payroll system without any fraud or misrepresentation. Next is preparing the payroll. Payroll system is used to measure the entity's payroll. The business should have a proper internal control to prepare the payroll procedure to prevent any risk to occur. In payroll system, salary scale can be manually updated or automatically updated using an automated system with a certain application controls that controlled by the Human Resources Department. Payroll Department will prepare the payroll register and an independent check will be performed to ensure that the reasonableness of amount based on the hour work. Now we continue with the other payroll function, which is recording the payroll. Control for recording the payroll should be established to ensure that all transactions are recorded and there are no unrecorded payroll liabilities. It is necessary to report the amount of payroll accurately in a proper basis period. There are several steps in recording the payroll, which is the first one is the amount calculated by the payroll system are entered in the payroll journal. The payroll register will be the supporting document for the payroll journal. The other step is the related deductions are also journalized in the account based on the payroll register. In this part, payslip will be provided to accompany the payroll checks or electronic direct bank transfer. Employees can refer to the payslip so that any differences can be reconciled with the payroll department or human resources department. In addition, an independent check on payroll detail by appropriate personnel will be carried out to avoid any misstatement. Now, we move to the last part of payroll function, which is payment transaction or also known as payout. Payments are updated on the payroll system. There are some controls over the payroll payment, which is the first one is segregation of duties between personnel who has the authority to sign the check and the person who initiate or process payroll transaction. The second one is the signatory check should ensure that the payroll amount is correctly stated and details of the employee, such as name and address, are matched and comply with the payroll register. The third one is indication of payment should be made to the payroll release after the payment has been made to prevent any resubmission of duplicate payment. The fourth one is the custody and mailing of check should be the responsibility of the signatory check to avoid any fraud and authorization of check. And the last one is putting in place an impressed bank account that is specific for payroll, thus ensuring only the amount to be paid for the month is available in the account to prevent overpayment to the employees.
Okay, next I will explain about the developing the audit plan. Developing an audit plan for payroll transaction involves performing risk assessment procedure by obtaining an understanding of the entity and its internal control over payroll transaction. Based on the information, obtained risk of material misstatement are assessed and further audit procedure are designed. As we can see, this is a risk assessment procedure. Okay, first is obtaining an understanding of internal control over payroll transaction. What are the payroll internal control? Payroll internal control are the procedure business follow to protect its payroll information. The auditor can better understand the control over payroll by preparing a written description or flowchart or completing an internal control questionnaire on payroll transaction. Internal control questionnaire asks detailed questions about control relevant to each control objective. The auditor can then determine whether internal control on payroll are properly and effectively implemented. For the example, auditor may observe the segregation of function between HR and payroll division. Internal payroll control are also involves dividing payroll tasks are split between department and workers. Dividing tasks means that more people have an eye on the method of payroll, which makes someone less capable of fraud. Okay, second is assessing risk of material misstatement. The auditor assesses the risk of material misstatement based on the understanding acquired from the entity. The auditor can decide whether the salary is susceptible to risk mistake because payroll calculations are complex. Moreover, auditor focus more on overstatement of payroll payment because it is impact on employee welfare. Risk of fraud also should be considered by the auditor when planning the work which is to be performed on payroll, because companies that are obviously well controlled internally will suffer from the fraud. Most common payroll fraud include the inclusion of fictitious, which means a ghost employees on the payroll. Common feature that often facilitate this fraud is inadequate segregation of duty. Fraud can be hard to prevent in event of collusion between workers, although it is not the auditor duties in order to adequate proof of fraud, but auditor must identify and assess the risk of misstatement due to the fraud and respond appropriately. Okay, the last one is designing further audit procedure. Further audit procedure comprise test of control and substantive procedure. This provides guidelines on the conduct of scheduled procedure and how efficiency of control is evaluated. Tests of control demonstrate the efficiency of control operation in avoiding or identifying material misstatement in a financial statement assertion. The auditor are responsible for designing further tests that should be performed. The amount of procedure to be performed are based on the assessed risk level. The auditor should address significant risk of misstatement by evaluating the design of control and determine whether the control are implemented effectively. The auditor need not rely on evidence obtained from prior period or analytical procedure to address risk of misstatement in payroll record. For example, make sure employees are paid only for their works. The test of control should be followed by observed clocking on procedure and the level of supervision. The substantive procedure is a selection of the workers from the payroll is chosen and the hours paid to each clock are settled
Coming
accordingly.
further audit procedure. Test of control and substantive test of transaction procedure are the most important means of verifying account balance in the payroll and personnel cycle. These tests are emphasized because of the lack of independent third-party evidence, such as confirmations for verifying accrued wages, withheld income taxes, accrued payroll taxes, and the other balance sheets account. Furthermore, in the most audit, the amount in balance sheets account are small and can be verified with relative ease if the auditor is confident enough that the payroll transactions are correctly entered into the computer. The first type of test of control is content test of design effectiveness. Tests of design effectiveness are for the auditor to understand the information systems and the internal control specific to the client to determine the effectiveness of controls over payroll. The test of design effectiveness will be an organization notes that they have controls around the hiring process, and one control being that background checks are conducted on all new hires. In order for an auditor to test the design of this particular control, the auditor will look to see a background check that was conducted. For example, recently hired employee. This information for the one example employee will confirm that the organization has a process in place to perform background check for new hires. The second one is test of operating effectiveness. Test of audit procedure performed to test operating effectiveness to control or prevent and detecting material misstatement at the relevant assertion level. The assessment of tests involve a test of design and also operating effectiveness. The timing for this test is primarily during interim work, and the risk component for this test is control risk. Auditors need to understand the function within the payroll transaction to determine the necessary control and the potential misstatement. Because the payroll is tend to be prone to be overstatement. If the auditor is reporting on the effectiveness of internal control, the level of understanding control and extent of test of control must be sufficient to issue an opinion. Next one is this is a summary of transaction-related auditing objectives, key control, test of control, and substantive tests. The audit objective is to record that payroll payments are work actually performed by existing employee accuracy. The key internal control for it is time record by approved by supervisor. And common test of controls made is to examine time record for indications of approval. And the common substantive test of transactions are review the payroll journal, general ledger, and payroll earning record for large or unusual account. And the second one is the existing payroll transactions are recorded completeness. The payroll checks are pre-numbered and accounted for. The common test of control is account for sequences of payroll check, and the common substantive test of transaction is reconcile the disbursement in the payroll journal with the disbursement the payroll bank statement. The second that we have in the audit procedure is the designing substantive audit procedure. Substantive procedures with the payroll is subjective, a high level of inherent risk associated to complement and accuracy assertion, and most entitled to have a proper control system over payroll in place. Substantive analytical it contains three types, which is analytical procedure, test of details of transaction, and test of details of balance. The purpose of substantive procedure is to determine the fairness of statement assertions. The timing for this substantive procedure are primarily at or near balance sheet date. The test measurement is the monetary error in transactions and balance. The risk component is detection risk. The purpose is for auditors focus on the application of analytical procedure to payroll expenses account and test of details. The procedure also used during account audit to check error in the balance sheet and other financial documents. Substantive analytical procedures are usually performed when the risk of material misstatement is low and there are adequate control procedures in place, and of course only when there are plausible relationships among data. Auditors usually perform substantive analytical procedure by building their expectations and compare them to the client record. If there is a significant difference between auditor expectations and the client's record, further test is usually performed for investigations of the reason behind such difference. For example, auditor usually perform substantive analytical procedure or interest expenses of borrowing by multiply the average outstanding balance of borrowing with the average interest rate. Also, the simple way analytical procedure is to review the understanding of the entity and the likelihood of changes to payroll amount, and to determine any fluctuation in payroll amount before this year and the previous year. And the third one is to determine the ratio for average age per employee, and some changes may be due to rise in wages rate for the current year. In the next, after analytical procedure in substantive audit procedure also consists test of details of transaction. Tests of transaction are used to corroborate test of balance. Test of transaction is normally performed in the audit interim and the form of dual purpose test. In addition, auditors only focus on test of balance and not test of transaction for payroll transaction. The test of control for payroll transactions can be constituted as a test of transaction. Tests of transactions are tests for the error in the individual transactions. Substantive tests of transactions emphasize the verifications of transactions recorded in the journals and posted in the general ledger. For example, an auditor may examine a large purchase of inventory by testing that the cost of the goods included on the invoice is properly recorded in the inventory and account payable account. The next one we have is test of details of balance. Test of details of balance is involving obtaining evidence about accrued payroll balance. It includes the following tasks. Firstly is recalculating payroll liability. Auditor must recalculate the accrued payroll and check all authorized deductions. They are required to check on the consistency of payroll calculations and payroll accruals. The second one is verifying director and executive officers' remuneration. Auditors should also inspect documents such as minutes of meetings and approve the remunerations for the director's officer. Also, test of details account balance also focus on items that contain in the financial statement. The test of details of balance consider the closing balance in the general ledger. For example, the auditor may want to test account payable by examining a sample of individual invoice that make up the ending balance of account payable. That's all for me. Next.
Hi, I'm Shazwan, metric number 256158. So for conclusion, basically payroll is a significant expense for most entities. Auditors should understand the business function that relate to payroll transaction because it will help auditor to determine the necessary internal control over payroll. Auditors should determine the extension for payroll transaction and their related audit objective, such as occurrence, completeness, accuracy, cut off, right and obligation, and also classifications. In order to achieve this objective, auditors should perform tests of control to reduce the control risk and the number of substantive tests to be performed in order to achieve the objective. The main concern for audit of payroll is overpayment, but for accurate payroll balance, the auditor concern more about understatement of the accrual, and thus the auditor's focus is on test of controls over accuracy of payroll calculation and also the payment. And that's all from us. Thank you.